It is not, it's not on what they did, because they didn't start the fight, but they did. Everybody piled on once it started, which bothered us. And so we're gonna put it out there, is that it was a tweet that said abolish the Civil Rights Act. And that is something that neither you nor I are in favor of. We don't believe the Civil Rights Act should be abolished.
That's exactly right. The Civil Rights Act is authorized in the Constitution. And if you go back in history to back before the Civil Rights Act was in place, there was huge abuse of minorities, or religious minorities, ethnic minorities, just every type of minority you can think of. And examples would be the Japanese relocation camps. This is the Federal Housing Authority actually had a policy not to give any loans to minority groups. So that'd be like Blacks and Hispanics and so on. And they also didn't give any loans to any area that they considered to be like a bad housing market. And part of what they looked at is if any area of a town or city had like high numbers of minorities in it, or immigrants, or anything that they considered to be bad, they would put that in the bad housing market area and wouldn't grant a loan. So I mean, talk about forced segregation. And that's, the federal government was actually doing that until 1946, when the Supreme Court said they couldn't do that anymore. So
because you wouldn't want to get started on things like, I mean, I know people get like make jokes about like equitable transportation and things like that, but there's a reason why we talk about people living on the wrong side of the tracks and things like that. I mean, they were literally dividing lines between neighborhoods. Like you could live on one side of the tracks, and that was the white section, and the other side was not. And you knew how, where you lived, like where you were not, where you were not allowed to go if you were not white, where you were not allowed to live based on which side of the tracks you lived. I mean, this was not a good thing. And so, when we talk about the Civil Rights Act and all the laws that, and all the work that brought us up to the Civil Rights Act, this is something that I am literally an expert on. And so when I see people tweeting things like abolish the Civil Rights Act, I get really angry, because this is a very complex issue that took decades and centuries actually of work to get America to the point where we could actually put this law into place. And people do not understand the complexity of this law and what it actually did. And what it actually did is it righted the American ship. It didn't make America the best place in the world, but it righted the ship to give us the opportunity to make America what it was supposed to be in the beginning. And so I'm going to clear up a myth, because everybody talks about, the Civil Rights Act needs to be abolished because, we want to end CRT and all these other buzzwords. So I'm just going to end the discussion right here, because everybody who says this doesn't understand the Civil Rights Act. So this is what the Civil Rights Act says, and go look it up yourself. It says you cannot discriminate against somebody because of their race and their sex and their national origin and their religion and their color and their creed. It never says what religion or what sex or what color or what creed. It never specifies. And so when people say that it gives special rights, it gives no special rights to anyone. It protects everyone. And this is why I get really angry when I see abolish the Civil Rights Act. The Civil Rights Act is what gives you the right to go and fight when you think you are being discriminated against because of, your race or your sex. So what I tell people when people say, well, I'm being, I like reverse discrimination. They say, well, reverse discrimination, it is the Civil Rights Act that gives you the right to go to court on that issue, because it says you can't be discriminated against because of your race. And if you say I'm being discriminated against because I'm white, the Civil Rights Act says you have that right to fight that because that's your race. Or if you say, like Ross, I'm being discriminated against because I'm a man, that's your sex. The Civil Rights Act says you have the right to fight that. See, that is your right. The law is written there to protect you. And that's why when people say, well, it gives special rights, it gives no special rights. It gives you the right to fight it when the government uses that against you. And it just makes me so angry when I see the libertarians trying to take that away. It's like, do you have any idea what will happen to this country if that is taken away? Oh, wait, I do know what will happen to this country if that's taken away, because I understand why that law was put into this country. Because before that law was put into this country had segregation, it had Jim Crow laws. It was awful. And there was a reason why we had to have that.
Yeah, a bunch of stupid laws. You couldn't pick, you'd marry if it's somebody from a different race.
It was literally illegal to marry interracial marriage in certain states. I mean, think about that.
It's terrible. Yeah, it's completely awful. And the thing is, there's so many states around, and a lot of them are doing those stupid laws. So the only way that can happen is, or the only way that can be stopped is with some kind of federal laws or Supreme Court decisions or things along those lines.
And and I'm going to give just some things like, and this by the way, this part is just for libertarians, because I know a lot of libertarians really fought the vaccine mandates. They didn't want to get vaccinated, and they used religious exemption because a lot of them had very strong, deeply held religious beliefs against the vaccine, and they asked for those exemptions to their employers. The Civil Rights Act was the law that gave them the right to ask for those religious vaccines. I don't think they get that. When they're asking to abolish the Civil Rights Act, what they were asking to abolish is the law that protected them against the government mandates, against those mandates. So it actually protects you against the federal laws that they believe tried to hurt them. So that was actually a protection that was put there to protect you even against the government. So there's a reason why that's there. And another one, like there are some people that didn't want to get the vaccine because they were, to them, they felt that the vaccine hurt their unborn children. There were men that didn't want to get the vaccine, like Aaron Rodgers as an example, where he wanted to have children. He did not want that hurting his potential sperm, for his baby. There were, I know a very prominent woman in the Libertarian Party, not prominent woman, she's married to a very prominent man who she asked for an exemption because she and this man are trying to have a baby. And so she asked for an exemption because she's trying to get pregnant, and she was granted it. That's under the Civil Rights Act. That's what gave them protection. So they don't understand that when they ask to have the Civil Rights Act abolished, they are literally slitting their own throats. Because if that act was not there, they would not have any rights. You have no grievance before the government. If there's no law, you have no grievance. The governments can do whatever they want. The individual states can do whatever they want. The federal government can do what they want. There's no law that says they can't. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to win, but it means you at least have a shot to go before the courts and argue it. You can file your petition. And this is where, when the libertarians say abolish this, they don't understand what they're abolishing. And I ask them to please stop doing this. Some laws are not terrible. Some laws are there to protect your liberty. And when you try to take that away, you are literally destroying your own liberty. Please stop that. And so I understand that they get like stubborn little children, and they just want to stomp their feet and scream because they want to be right all the time. But there are some things that children are wrong on, and that's one of them. And when they take away, they take that away, trust me, you will destroy your own liberty. Please don't do that.
I mean, during the pandemic, there was a really scary bill that the state of New York was trying to pass, and it basically would allow the state of New York to detain groups of people that they thought had COVID. So they could literally have detained like all the Orthodox Jews or all the Amish people in New York under that if the Civil Rights Act wasn't around. Now, obviously, the Civil Rights Act protected it, and that bill didn't get through.
The Civil Rights Act protected so many people during COVID. You know, it's you know, there are stories upon stories upon stories of where the Civil Rights Act put the brakes on so many authoritarian behaviors. And thank goodness it was there. And yeah, but leave it to libertarians, you know, leave it to libertarians to not know what they're talking about and then say, well, you know what, this sounds like a good idea because I saw a podcast and someone made a really great argument. And it's like, well, that person doesn't know what they're talking about. Trust me on this. I've been doing this for 30 years. This is the only thing I've done my entire career. I know what happens when this law isn't there. And I've seen this law protect everybody. And when I say I've seen this law protect everybody, I mean, I've seen this law protect everybody. People that I find repugnant, this law has protected. And I've seen this law protect people that I agree with. So this law protects everybody.
Yeah, completely agree on that. And you could just go back in time to 1941, and that will show you what life was like before the Civil Rights Act. And it was pretty close to authoritarian in the United States during that time period. I mean, it was rounding people up because they were from Asia. And
yeah, see, I can't even imagine. I'm going to be honest with you. The one thing that I am thankful for is that we had the Civil Rights Act in place in this country when COVID hit, and everybody was locked up, and we didn't, you know, the governors of our states had almost complete autonomy to do what they wanted to do. If it had not been for the Civil Rights Act, I don't honestly know what a lot of them would have done.
Oh, it would have been just a nightmare.
Yeah, well, we don't know. I mean, we don't know, and thank God we'll never know. Yeah. But I am gonna put this out there. The guy who was president during that time went on stage tonight and talked about how much he liked communist China and how they dealt with people. So keep that in mind, everybody. Keep that in mind, everybody, that there was a law that said we all had rights. All of us had rights. But when COVID hit and all of us were locked up, the guy who was in charge went on stage tonight and was talking about how he thought the way China handles drug dealers is a good way of doing it. We have no idea what else he thought may have been a good idea. We had another guy who's president right now who's talking about how he thinks MAGA Republicans are a threat to our nation. And thank God we have civil rights laws. So just everybody keep that in mind when you try to abolish things.